The private dining room on the 32nd floor of the Aldrich Tower was not a place a child could find by accident. It required a keycard, a second keycard, a name on a list that had never been made public, and the kind of silence that money buys when it has been buying silence long enough to know what it costs. The elevator stopped at 32 only for people Callum Driscoll permitted. The maître d' knew the floor existed the way certain people know where bodies are buried, completely, quietly, and without any desire to confirm it aloud. So when the elevator doors opened at 8:47 on a Thursday evening and a small girl walked out alone, still wearing her school backpack, her left shoe untied, her coat damp at the shoulders from rain she had not been dressed for, the two men stationed near the entrance did not know what their training required of them. She was perhaps 8 years old, maybe 9. Her hair had been braided that morning by someone who cared, but the braid had come half undone. She had dark eyes that moved quickly across the room, the way a child's eyes move when they have learned that reading a space correctly could matter. She did not cry. She did not ask for help. She walked to the nearest man, looked up at him, and said, "I need to see Callum Driscoll. My mother told me to find him. She said he would know my name." Stay with this story because what happened next was not what anyone in that room expected, and because it is not really a story about the Montreal underworld or about the man half of Quebec's business community crossed the street to avoid. It is about what gets left behind when two people love each other badly, and what comes back when the world runs out of time. Inside the private dining room, Callum Driscoll sat at the far end of a table set for 8. 6 of those seats were occupied. The 7th belonged to a city councillor who had excused himself to the washroom 12 minutes ago and had not returned, which everyone pretended not to notice. The 8th had never been intended for anyone. Callum was 41. He had the kind of face that did not announce itself in rooms the way powerful men's faces often did. No particular height, no theatrical presence, nothing that would make a stranger point him out in a crowd. What he had instead was stillness. He sat the way still water sits, with everything happening beneath the surface and nothing showing above it. His second, a man named Reed, who had been with him since the beginning of things, appeared at the door. He leaned down. He spoke quietly. Every face at the table watched Callum's face for information, the way people watch a sky that has been reliable until today. Callum's expression did not change. "Excuse me," he said. He rose. He walked to the corridor without hurry. The girl was standing between the two door guards, her backpack still on, looking at a painting on the wall of the Laurentian Mountains that had cost more than most people's cars. She turned when she heard his footsteps. He stopped. She said, "Are you Callum Driscoll?" "Yes." "My name is Wren." She said it the way children say things they have been made to memorize, carefully, without inflection, because the words mattered too much to risk getting them wrong. "My mother is Saoirse Baird. She said if anything happened to her, I should find you. She said you'd understand when you saw." She pushed up the left sleeve of her coat. On the inside of her wrist, just below the bend, was a small tattoo. Not a child's tattoo. Someone had inked it there when she was an infant. A single line of 3 dots in a row, spaced exactly. "She has the same one," Wren said. "She said you do too." Callum looked at the mark. He had not thought about his own in years. It sat on the inside of his right arm, below the elbow, faded now, from a night in a kitchen in Verdun when he was 26 and Saoirse was 23. And they had been stupid enough to believe that marking skin could make a thing permanent. "Come inside," he said. Wren assessed the room behind him the way she had assessed the entrance. "Is it safe?" He looked at her for a moment. "Yes." She seemed to weigh that. Then she said, "My mom said you'd probably say that even if it wasn't." Reed made a sound that might have been a cough. Callum pulled out a chair at a small side table near the window that looked over the city. Montreal spread below them, wet and lit, the St. Lawrence dark beyond the towers. He sat across from her. He kept his hands flat on the table where she could see them because something about the way she watched adults told him she had learned to track hands. "When did something happen to your mother?" he asked. Wren set her backpack on the chair beside her. 4 days ago. Her voice was steady in the particular way that meant she had been practicing steadiness. "She had a fall. At work. The hospital called it a traumatic brain injury. She was at St. Luke. She stopped. She didn't wake up. Callum said nothing for a moment. Outside, rain ran down the floor-to-ceiling glass in long, clear lines. She left a letter, Wren said. She unzipped the front pocket of her backpack and removed an envelope. It had been opened and resealed with tape, the kind of tape you find in a hospital gift shop. The tape had been applied with the precision of a child who needed the seal to mean something. She wrote it before, not just before. She wrote it a long time ago. But she updated it. The date on the inside is 6 months ago. He looked at the envelope. His name was on the front. Not his full name, just Callum. In handwriting he recognized the way you recognize a melody you have not heard in a decade. Immediately, and somewhere below thought. She didn't tell you I existed, Wren said. It was not a question. He met her eyes. No. She nodded. Not hurt, exactly. Something more considered than hurt. She looked like someone who had already spent 4 days arriving at conclusions adults would have taken months to find. She was going to. That's what the letter says. She kept waiting for the right time. A pause. I think there isn't a right time for something like that. Callum sat back. The room behind the door had gone perfectly quiet. Reed would have cleared it. He knew that without looking. 9 years. If this child was 9, and she was, he could count backward to a December in Verdun and arrive here without error. Then for 9 years Saoirse Baird had been somewhere in this city, or somewhere adjacent to it, raising a child who had his blood and her steadiness, and the mark on her wrist that they had put there together one ridiculous, impulsive night. He looked at Wren's hands. Her nails were bitten short. There was a small scar on her right knuckle, the kind that comes from falling off a bike or a scooter, from moving too fast through a world that does not slow down for children. She had her mother's mouth. He recognized it with a precision that hurt. Are you hungry? He asked. She looked at him with an expression that said she had expected something different. I had crackers on the bus. The bus. The 165 and then the 24. Mom showed me once. She showed me where this building was. I didn't know why then. She touched the strap of her backpack. I think she was making sure I knew in case. Callum pressed the call button on the table. When the server appeared, he ordered soup and bread without looking at the menu, and milk, and asked that it come quickly. The server disappeared without asking questions. That was what this floor was for. Where did you sleep? Callum asked. These past 4 days. With my neighbor, Madame Fortin. She's older, she's kind, but she said she couldn't keep me forever. And someone from the school called, and there was a woman from the government who came with forms. Wren said forms the way a child says a word they have heard adults use to mean something is about to change, for the worse. Madame Fortin told her I had family. She didn't know if that was true, but my mom told her once that there was someone, so she said it anyway. Your mother was brave, Callum said. Wren looked at the window. She was scared a lot. She didn't show it, but I could tell. I think being brave and being scared are the same thing, and people just decide which word to use. He had no answer for that, because she was right. The food arrived. Wren ate with the focused efficiency of a child who has learned not to appear too hungry, tearing the bread into careful pieces, keeping her elbows off the table, thanking the server in French and then in English as though she wasn't sure which one to use. Callum watched her and felt something move through him that he had not been prepared for and did not have a name for yet. Saoirse. She had left him in March, 11 years ago. Not with a fight, not with accusations. She had left the way principled people leave when they know they cannot stay. Quietly, having made a decision she could not explain without asking him to be someone he had not yet decided to become. He had looked. Not the way he looked for things now, not with the full machinery of what he had built. He had looked the way a man looks when he is still pretending it was her choice and not something he drove her toward. He had not found her. He had eventually accepted that she had not wanted to be found. He had been wrong about the reason. The letter, he said. Will you let me read it? Wren had finished most of the soup. She looked at the envelope on the table between them. She said I could decide whether to give it to you before or after you said yes. Yes, to what? To keeping me. She said it plainly, without drama, in the tone of someone asking about a practical arrangement. But her hands were very still on the edge of the table. She said you might not want to. She said I should know that wasn't about me. Callum looked at this child, his child, sitting across from him in a restaurant that had never had a child in it, wearing a damp coat and a half-undone braid, and the particular dignity of someone carrying more than their size should require. Yes, he said. Wren blinked. You don't know what's in the letter yet. It doesn't matter what's in the letter. She studied him for a long moment with the patience of someone who has learned not to trust quick answers. You could be lying. I could be. How would I know if you're not? He thought about that. You'd have to watch and see. She considered this the way she seemed to consider everything, fully, without performance. Then she slid the envelope across the table. He did not open it yet. He would open it later, alone, when he could afford to let his face show what it needed to show. Instead, he set it in his inside jacket pocket and said, I'm going to make some calls. There are forms adults argue about. They don't mean you're leaving. The woman with the government forms will not need to come back. Wren looked at him. Then she looked at the city below the window, the lights spreading out through rain toward the river. She was quiet long enough that he wondered what she was deciding. Madame Fortin, pack my things, she said finally. She has my mom's plants. She said she'd keep them until there was somewhere for them to go. We'll get your things tonight, and the plants. A pause. Do you have kids? No. Do you have a dog? No. Do you have cereal? The question was so ordinary it nearly broke something in him. I can get cereal. Wren nodded as though this was satisfactory. She picked up her spoon and finished the last of the soup with the quiet focus of a child who had decided, provisionally, to trust. Reed drove them through the wet city without speaking, which was his particular gift. Wren sat in the back seat of the black car and watched Montreal pass outside the window. The rain-blurred neon of St. Catherine, the dark shape of the mountain, the apartment lights in long yellow rows. She pressed one finger against the glass and traced a raindrop without following it to the end. Callum made 3 calls. The first to his attorney, Marianne Cote, who answered on the second ring and listened without interrupting and said she would file for emergency guardianship before morning, and he should text her the child's full name and date of birth. The second to Reed's direct line, though Reed sat 10 feet away, because there were things the driver did not need to hear. The third to Madame Fortin, whose number Wren recited from memory in a voice that wobbled only once. The old woman wept when she heard Wren was safe. She wept again when Callum said someone would come for the belongings. She said, Saoirse told me once there was a man. She never said his name, she only said he would come if she could not. A pause. She talked about him like a wound that had healed wrong, not badly, just differently than it should have. Callum accepted that. Her things will be well cared for. Madame Fortin's voice sharpened. And the child? Yes. You'd better mean that. I do. She was quiet for a moment. Then, softer, she's a serious little thing. Serious the way her mother was. Loves birds. Saoirse used to point them out on walks. Said birds were the world reminding you it was still turning. A pause. Wren. She named her Wren. Callum looked at the back of his daughter's head. Her breath fogged the glass. I know. The apartment on Casgrain was a third-floor walk-up with good light and bookshelves on every wall and 3 small terracotta pots on the windowsill that had been watered recently. Madame Fortin was waiting at the door with 2 canvas bags, a child's backpack shaped like a fox, and a cardboard box sealed with packing tape. Wren went to the box immediately and placed both hands on it without opening it. Mom's things, she said. No one opened it. No one suggested she should. Callum carried it himself down to the car, and when he set it in the trunk he was careful about it in a way he did not examine. His house on the plateau was not what Wren had expected. She stood in the entryway and looked at the high ceilings, the dark wood floors, the bookshelves that did not have the same warmth as her mother's. Organized, not loved. The absence of photographs. The absence of noise. The absence of everything that made a space feel inhabited by someone who expected to be seen. You live here alone, she said. Yes. It's very quiet. Is that bad? She thought about it. It depends on the kind of quiet. Reed appeared behind them and closed the front door. Wren looked at him. Are you the one who worries? Reed looked at Callum. Callum looked at the wall. Someone has to, Reed said. Wren seemed to approve of that answer. She followed Callum upstairs to the guest room, white walls, a good mattress, a lamp with a warm bulb. Nothing that said anyone had ever stayed. He told her it was hers. She sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her hand flat against the quilt. He watched her test the word mine against the room without saying it aloud. For how long? She asked. He had made this mistake already with himself and caught it in time. For as long as you need it. Which is the same as for as long as you want. She looked at the door. My mom said needing things makes people go away. Callum crouched so his eyes were level with hers. The movement felt strange. He could not remember the last time he had lowered himself for any reason that was not tactical. That was her experience. It doesn't have to be yours. Wren studied his face with the careful attention of someone checking whether a surface will hold weight before they step on it. Then she said, "Okay," and looked at the quilt again. He found her a clean shirt to sleep in. It fell past her knees. She thanked him in the precise, considered way she thanked everyone for everything, as though gratitude were a form she had learned to fill out correctly because the alternative was owing something she couldn't calculate. He left the hall light on. At the door she said, "Mr. Driscoll." He turned. "Yes." "Did my mother love you?" The room went still. He had been asked questions in boardrooms and back rooms and across tables from men who meant the questions as threats. This was none of those. "Yes," he said. Wren's fingers curled into the quilt. "Did you love her?" He thought about Saoirse Baird at 23 in a Verdun kitchen saying, "I want you to hate the parts of this that deserve hating." He thought about her handwriting on an envelope. He thought about a mark on her wrist that had crossed 9 years of silence and a rainy Thursday and a 32nd floor to find him. "Yes," he said, "not well enough, but yes." Wren nodded once, as though this confirmed something she had already suspected. "Good night, Mr. Driscoll." "Good night, Wren." He pulled the door most of the way closed, leaving a narrow line of light across the floor. Downstairs, Reed was waiting in the kitchen with his phone and the careful expression of a man who has understood that something has permanently changed and is still deciding whether to say so. Callum walked past the cabinet where he kept scotch and stood at the kitchen window. The rain had thinned to mist. Street lamps burned gold and soft through it. "Is she yours?" Reed asked. "Yes." Reed was quiet for a moment. "Then everything is different now." Callum looked up toward the ceiling, toward the room where a child who had crossed a city alone on 2 buses was lying in a stranger's house, with her mother's name on her lips and her mother's steadiness in her hands. "It was already different," he said, "the moment she walked out of that elevator." He read Saoirse's letter at 2 in the morning, sitting at his desk with the lamp on and the house quiet above him. He had been expecting it to undo him. He had been wrong about the shape of it. It was not long. Saoirse had always believed brevity was a form of respect. "Callum, if you're reading this, then Wren found you, which means she is braver than I gave her credit for, and I gave her quite a lot. I want to start by saying I know. I know what I did. I know what I did from both of you by deciding on my own. I've argued with myself about it for 9 years and I have not won the argument yet. I left because I was pregnant and I was afraid. Not of you specifically. Of the world around you and what it does to people who love someone at the center of it. I watched it happen to others. I didn't want to watch it happen to her. I didn't want to watch it happen to her. I didn't want to watch it happen to me. I told myself I was protecting her. Maybe I was. Maybe I was protecting myself from having to ask you to choose, because I wasn't sure which way you'd go, and I couldn't survive the answer if it was the wrong one. She is wonderful, Callum. She notices everything. She is serious in the way that frightens some adults and reassures me, because serious children become people who think before they speak and mean what they say. She loves birds. She has your patience and my stubbornness, and I'm sorry about the stubbornness. It will give you trouble. If she's with you, I didn't make it. Don't let her feel like a problem to be managed. Don't love her from a distance, because distance has always been easier for you. She will let you, and it will cost her more than it costs you, and that is not fair. Be someone she can stay near. That's all I'm asking. Not safety, not perfection. Just stay near. Saoirse. He folded the letter and held it against his mouth for a long time. He was not a man who had practiced grief. He had moved through losses by moving past them, which was not the same thing, and he knew it. But Saoirse had known it too, had said so, and the letter reached back across 9 years and found the place she had always been able to find. In the morning he found Wren at the kitchen table with a pencil and a stack of paper from his printer. She had been up long enough to pour herself a glass of water and find the pencils in the cup near the stove. She was drawing with the focused quiet of someone who drew the way other people breathed. He made coffee. She drew. The snow that had started overnight covered the rooftops outside the kitchen window in a thin white layer. The city was muffled and clean. You don't cook, Wren said without looking up. I cook. What can you cook? He opened the refrigerator. There were things in it that a housekeeper had arranged and he could not reliably name. Eggs, probably pasta. We need cereal. She said it the way she said most things, as a statement of fact that happened to also be a request. And orange juice and bread for toast. My mom always had those things. I'll get them. She looked up for the first time. Now? There's a dépanneur on the corner. She considered whether to ask to come. He could see the consideration. She stayed at the table. He went and came back with 2 kinds of cereal, because he wasn't sure which one, and orange juice and bread, and a box of tea because he remembered something from the letter about Saoirse drinking tea in the mornings. Wren chose the cereal with the least sugar and poured it herself, carefully, measuring by eye. She ate standing at the counter because that was apparently how she had always eaten breakfast, and it was one of the small, specific truths about her that arrived without announcement and stayed. Do you have children? She asked. Other ones? No. Did you want them? He poured his coffee. I hadn't thought about it in a long time. She looked at him over the cereal bowl. That's not the same as no. He looked back at her. No, he said, it's not. She seemed satisfied with that answer in the way she was satisfied with honest ones, not warmly, but completely. She put her bowl in the sink and washed it. He noticed she washed it with the same deliberate care she applied to everything, as though she had learned that being tidy was a way of taking up less space. He noticed, and he did not like what that meant she had learned. Reed arrived at 9 with a folder and a look that said the folder contained problems. Callum took it in the study. Wren was back at the kitchen table drawing. The study door was half open. He could hear the scratch of her pencil. Marcus Vey has been asking around, Reed said, setting the folder on the desk. About your schedule. About why 3 meetings moved in the past week. About why you were seen leaving the Aldrich with a child. Callum opened the folder without hurry. Marcus Vey ran distribution out of Laval with the confidence of a man who had never been shown the cost of competence. He had been making small moves at the edges of Callum's territory for months, small enough to be deniable, persistent enough to be a message. Who told him? We don't know yet. Find out. Working on it. Reed lowered his voice. If he learns about the girl, he won't. That's an intention, not a plan. Callum looked at him. Then make it a plan. Reed held his ground, which was one of the reasons Callum kept him. She can't be kept invisible. She's a child, not a document. She needs school. A doctor. Ordinary things that require ordinary records. The more we hide her, the more she looks like something worth finding. From the kitchen came the sound of a chair scraping back, and then small footsteps, and then Wren appeared in the doorway with a drawing in her hand. She looked at Reed, then at Callum. Are you talking about me? Neither of them answered immediately, which was its own kind of answer. You don't have to stop, she said. I know I'm complicated. She held the drawing at her side. My mom said I was the good kind of complicated. Reed looked at the floor. Callum stood. Come in, he said. Wren came in and stood in the middle of the study, looking at the bookshelves, legal texts, business history, maps of the city marked in ways that would not make sense to someone who did not know what the marks meant. Her eyes moved the way her eyes always moved, cataloging, assessing, filing. She put the drawing on the edge of his desk. It was a bird, a wren, small and detailed, wings folded, sitting on a branch that might have been a windowsill. She had drawn it with a discipline that did not match her age. "For your desk," she said, "since you don't have pictures." Callum looked at the drawing. Reed looked at the ceiling. "It can stay," Callum said. She nodded and went back to the kitchen. Reed waited until her footsteps were gone. "She's going to change everything in here." Callum picked up the drawing. The wren sat on its branch with a patience that seemed, for a pencil sketch done before breakfast, entirely specific to the person who had drawn it. "She's showing me what was missing," he said. "That's different." The first week was a study in the distance between knowing something and knowing how to do it. Callum knew Wren was his daughter. He did not know how to be her father. He knew she was grieving. He did not know how to leave room for grief without leaving her alone in it. He knew she needed ordinary things. He was not built for ordinary. He learned her patterns the way he learned anything important, by watching without appearing to watch. She woke before him always, and moved through the house so quietly that the first sign of her presence was usually the smell of the kettle heating, because she had decided tea was acceptable even if it tasted like grass. She folded things. She apologized for taking up space in ways that made him want to leave the room, and then come back and try again. She left drawings in unexpected places, a sparrow on a sticky note beside his coffee cup, a quick sketch of the plateau rooftops tucked inside the folder he was reviewing, a careful rendering of the St. Lawrence taped to the inside of the front door at child height. The night she did not sleep, he saw her on the security feed for his study, not because he was watching, because he was still awake and the monitor was on. She appeared at the top of the stairs at 12:47 and sat with her knees drawn up, looking down into the dark house. She did not call for him. She sat for 22 minutes and went back to bed. The second night she came out at 12:53. He had placed a folded blanket on the top step before midnight. In the morning it was folded again, precisely, returned to where he had put it. She said nothing at breakfast. Neither did he. By the fourth night the blanket had become a language between them. Not comfort yet, something quieter than comfort. A signal that moved in both directions. "I know you are there. I won't make you ask." His attorney filed for emergency guardianship on the fourth morning. The paperwork moved with the speed of paperwork that has been prepared by someone who understands which details to lead with. A family liaison worker came to the house on the sixth day, a woman with careful professional warmth and a clipboard, who asked Wren questions while Callum sat near the window and tried not to look like what he was. Wren answered in the measured, cooperative way she answered everything. When the woman left, Wren came and stood beside Callum at the window. "She's not going to take me away," she said. It sounded like a conclusion she had arrived at, not a reassurance she was offering. "No. But she could." "She won't." Wren looked out at the street. "Because of you." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "My mom said power was supposed to protect people. She said it usually didn't. I think she meant you when she said that." He did not deny it. She was right about both things. Wren turned and looked at him directly. "Are you going to be different because of me?" He thought about the letter. Be someone she can stay near. He thought about a mark on her wrist that a woman had given her daughter the way you give someone a map, just in case. He thought about what Reed had said. "She's going to change everything in here." "I don't know yet," he said, because she was too precise for the easy answer, and he already knew she would know the difference. "But I'm trying to find out. That's not nothing." Wren considered this for long enough that he had stopped expecting a response. Then she said, "No, it's not nothing," and went back to the kitchen table and her drawings. The threat, when it came, arrived the way these things always arrived, through someone who thought information was a currency and had not yet understood the rate of exchange. Callum received a photograph on a Tuesday morning. Wren at the schoolyard gate, taken from across the street, her red coat, her fox backpack. The angle that said whoever took it had been there long enough to choose the frame. Below the photograph, a message. "Nice to know you have something to lose, Driscoll." It came through a channel that traced back in 4 steps to Marcus Vey. Callum looked at the photograph for a long time. He could feel the part of him that had managed this city for 12 years, the part that knew exactly what a threat like this required in return. That part had a very clear set of answers. They were fast, and they were certain, and they did not leave questions behind them. He set his phone face down on the desk. Reed was in the doorway. "I know," he said. "Find out who took it. Everyone who knew the school, the time, the schedule. Already moving. And Marcus." "Yes." "I want to talk to him, not the way he expects." Reed studied him. "Which way does he expect?" Callum looked at the photo of his daughter at the school gate, not knowing she was being watched, adjusting the strap of her Fox backpack with both hands. "He expects me to come at him through his people. He expects noise. He wants me angry enough to make a mistake. And I'm not angry." He pushed the phone aside. "I'm certain. That's different." What happened to Marcus Fay's operation in the following 48 hours was not loud. It was structural. 3 of his suppliers received regulatory inspections with extraordinary timing. A detailed accounting of his arrangement with 2 city officials reached the investigative desk of a journalist who had been looking for exactly this kind of thing for 2 years. His warehousing contract was terminated by a logistics company whose board had recently acquired a member with particular connections. By the end of the second day, 2 men who had been central to his operation had stopped answering his calls, and a third was talking to people he should not have been talking to. Callum did not leave the city. He worked from his desk and his phone in the kitchen table where Wren was drawing. Because Reed had been right about one thing. He could not keep her invisible by locking her inside his world. He could only make the world around her smaller. On the evening before he was to meet Marcus Fay, Wren found him on the back porch. The temperature had dropped. She had brought her blanket. She climbed onto the bench beside him without asking, and sat close enough that the edge of the blanket touched his arm. "You have a meeting tomorrow," she said. "Yes." "With the bad man." He looked at her. "Ed talks too much." "He talks the right amount." She pulled the blanket tighter. "Are you going to hurt him?" He had been asked this before in different rooms with different stakes. He had always had an answer ready. "I'm going to stop him." "Is that the same thing?" "Not this time." She thought about that. "My mom used to say that doing the right thing in the wrong way was still wrong." A pause. "She said it mostly when I wanted to cheat at board games." The sound that came out of him was not quite a laugh, but it was adjacent to one, and Wren noticed. The edge of her mouth moved. "Will you come back?" she asked. He turned to look at her. The question was not dramatic. It was precise, and it was the only question that mattered. "Yes." "You can't promise that if you don't know." "I know how to come back." She looked at him. "How?" "Because I have somewhere to be." He held her gaze. "Somewhere I'm supposed to be. That's different from somewhere I'm allowed to be. You understand the difference." Wren was quiet for a moment. Then she leaned against his side, not hiding, not collapsing, just resting there the way you rest against something you have decided to trust provisionally and are considering trusting completely. He stayed still. The meeting with Marcus Fay took place at the port of Montreal, in a warehouse that smelled of salt water and diesel, and the particular cold of a building that has not been heated for business purposes. Marcus arrived with 3 men and the broad-shouldered confidence of someone who had expected this meeting to go differently. He was younger than Callum by 8 years and had never learned that confidence borrowed from other people's fear had a repayment schedule. Callum stood alone beneath the light. Reed was somewhere in the dark above them. So were others. Marcus knew that. It was the point. "Driscoll." Marcus spread his hands. "I heard fatherhood agreed with you." Callum did not react. Marcus's smile held for another moment. "I found your weak point." "No," Callum said. "You found my reason." Something shifted in the dark above them. Marcus's phone buzzed. Then, one of his men's phones. Marcus looked down at his screen and his expression did the thing. Expression did the thing expressions do when the ground turns out to be less solid than it appeared. "Your operation has a structural problem," Callum said. "Several, actually. The kind that attract attention from people who enjoy attention. Your partners in City Hall are currently having a very difficult conversation with someone who took very good notes. Your suppliers have discovered a regulatory interest in their facilities. The men you relied on to stand beside you are discovering that standing beside you has become expensive. Marcus stared at him. You have two choices, Callum said. You leave Montreal and you give Reed every name connected to that photograph. The one who took it, the one who sent it, the one who carried it. Or you stay and become the lesson that other people learn in whispers. A pause. You thought a photograph would make me afraid. You were wrong about what it made me. Marcus opened his mouth. He closed it. What did it make you? He said finally. Callum looked at him with the specific, total calm of a man who has nothing left to prove. Decided. By the time Callum returned to the house, it was past midnight. The lights in the hall were on, low. He came in through the back and stood in the kitchen for a moment, expecting the house to be asleep. Wren was sitting at the kitchen table in her pajamas, her blanket around her shoulders, a pencil in her hand. She looked up. You came back, she said. Yes. She slipped from the chair and crossed the kitchen to him. She was not a child who moved without thought. Everything she did was considered provisional, tested. But when she reached him, she put both arms around his waist and pressed her face against his coat without asking and without apologizing. He closed his arms around her. Above her head, he looked at the refrigerator. There were 4 drawings on it now, held by whatever magnets he had, arranged by Wren in an order that made sense to her. A wren on a branch. The Montreal skyline seen from plateau rooftops, a square house with a crooked chimney, and the newest one, which she had put up that morning, 2 figures standing outside the house, one tall, one small. They were not touching. The space between them was deliberate, close enough to mean something. Did you come back the same? She asked. Her voice was muffled by his coat. He thought about it. No. She nodded against him. Good. Spring arrived slowly over the plateau, the way spring arrives in Montreal, reluctantly in installments with setbacks. The snow melted from the rooftops and came back twice. The mountain grew green from the top down. The terraced gardens along Casgrain began to show green at the edges. Saoirse's plants, which Callum had brought from Madame Fortin's and placed on the kitchen windowsill, did not die. He had expected them to die. He knew nothing about plants, but Wren looked up what they needed and wrote it on a sticky note that she taped to the cabinet above them. Water Tuesdays, Friday, in direct light, don't move them. The plants obliged. Her room, which had started white, became yellow over a March weekend that involved 2 trips to the hardware store, a borrowed roller, and paint in Wren's hair that she discovered too late to prevent. She chose the color herself from a fan of samples she carried around the house for 3 days, holding each one against different walls and different light. The one she chose was called Butter Morning. She said her mom would have liked it. They painted on a Saturday. Callum taped the edges badly. Wren corrected him with the patient authority of someone who had watched her mother do this and retained the information. He spilled a small amount on the dropcloth. She did not. He got paint on his right arm somewhere around the 2nd hour. She got paint on her nose and then on his shoulder when she turned too quickly and did not see him standing there and gasped as though she had committed something serious. He looked at her. She looked at him. She started laughing. Not a polite laugh. Not the careful, considered laugh she used when adults said something she was expected to find funny. This was real, sudden and complete, the kind of laugh that starts in the chest and takes the rest of the body by surprise. It filled the yellow room. It was the most unguarded he had ever seen her, and it struck him so precisely and in such an unexpected place that he had to look away for a moment at the wall, at the paint, at anything. Hannah had laughed like that. The memory arrived without warning. Saoirse, in a kitchen in Verdun, laughing at something Callum had said that he no longer remembered, laughing with her whole self the way she did everything, without holding anything in reserve. Wren was still laughing. He let her. When she stopped, she wiped her eyes and looked at the paint on his arm. You're a disaster, she said. I have other skills. Name one. He thought about it. I'm told I'm very decisive. She looked unimpressed. That's not a skill. That's just not hesitating. He shook his head. but the warmth that moved through him before he could account for it was something he recognized, distantly, as something he had not felt in a very long time. Something like being in a room where you are known. The school held a family morning in April. Wren brought the flyer home on a Tuesday, set it on the kitchen counter, and said nothing. He found it when he was looking for his phone. He picked it up. Family printed in bright letters across the top. Reed texted at the same moment. Vase people making noise again. Need to talk. Callum looked at the flyer. He looked at his phone. He typed back, handle it, and put the phone face down. On Friday he sat in a classroom chair that was built for someone, a third his size, surrounded by glue sticks and construction paper and children who stared at him with the frank curiosity of people who have not yet learned that staring is impolite. Wren sat beside him, cheeks slightly pink, pretending not to be pleased. When her turn came, she stood up and held her drawing with both hands. It showed a yellow house on a Montreal street, a bird above it with its wings spread wide, a small girl in a red coat, and a tall figure beside her in dark colors, in the upper corner, drawn in yellow, always yellow. A woman's face, looking down, her expression specific and warm and clearly Saoirse in a way that no one in the room would have known but Callum did. At the bottom in careful printed letters, my family. He looked at the paper. The room was warm and small and smelled of glue and the particular industriousness of children making things. Around him, other parents leaned in to see their children's work, making the soft sounds adults make at small beautiful things. He was the kind of man who did not make those sounds in rooms. He had spent years ensuring that rooms knew this about him. He looked at the yellow crayon face in the corner of the drawing. He looked at the tall, dark figure standing beside the small one. He looked at the two words at the bottom of the page. Wren sat down beside him. She glanced at his face and then away. Is it okay? She asked quietly. He looked at her mother's seriousness in her eyes, and something that was only hers, particular and steady and still becoming. It's perfect, he said. She smiled, not the careful one, the real one, and looked back at the front of the room. That evening the house was quiet in the way it had learned to be quiet since Wren arrived, not empty, not waiting, just settled. She fell asleep on the couch before 9, exhausted from a week of school and yellow paint and the ordinary, extraordinary effort of being a child learning to trust that a house was somewhere she was allowed to stay. Callum did not move for a long time. His phone buzzed twice. He did not reach for it. Outside, Montreal moved through the night the way cities move, forward, without permission, without pause. The river went on. The mountain stood. Men like Marcus Vey regrouped and recalculated and looked for other doors, because that was what such men did, and that would not stop. But inside the house on the plateau, in a room where a yellow wall was still a little fragrant with fresh paint, where a drawing of a family was taped to the refrigerator beside a wren on a branch and a crooked chimney house, where 3 terracotta plants held their leaves toward the window because a 9-year-old had looked up what they needed and told him. Wren's hand found his sleeve in her sleep, her fingers curled around the fabric and held. He had spent most of his life being the kind of man who was careful never to need anything he could not acquire. Saoirse had known that about him and had loved him and had been afraid of it and had been right to be afraid. He looked at his daughter's hand on his sleeve and thought of a letter that said, "Be someone she can stay near." And for the first time in longer than he could account for, he was not thinking about what came next. He was thinking about staying exactly where he was. On the refrigerator, underneath the drawings, the wren, on its branch, watched the room with the patient, particular attention of a small creature that has chosen its perch and intends to remain. That was enough. For now and then for longer than now, that was enough. I keep thinking about the moment Wren pushed up her sleeve. Not because it was dramatic, though it was, but because she had crossed a city alone, on 2 buses, in the rain, at 9 years old, to find a man she had never met, carrying nothing but a name and a mark on her wrist, and the kind of courage that doesn't come from not being afraid. It comes from deciding that what's on the other side of the fear matters more than the fear itself. That's the part that stays with me. We talk about resilience like it's something people either have or don't, like it shows up fully formed in certain people and skips others, but watching Wren, The way she assessed every room before she entered it, the way she thanked people carefully, the way she folded things and washed her own bowl and drew birds on sticky notes and left them where someone might need to find them. I don't think resilience is a trait. I think it's a practice. Something you build, quietly, from the materials your life hands you, whether those materials are easy or not. Saoirse built it in her, not by protecting Ren from hard things, but by teaching her to name them honestly. Scared and brave are the same thing, Ren said. People just decide which word to use. That's not something a child figures out on her own. That's something a mother teaches, especially, when the teaching is hard. And then there's Callum. Because here's the thing about people who have spent a long time being the most powerful person in every room they enter. They often have no idea what they actually cost the people around them. Not because they're cruel, but because power, when it goes unexamined, tends to mistake itself for protection. Callum had built an entire life around controlling what he could reach and ignoring the rest. He told himself that was enough. He was wrong. And somewhere underneath all that stillness, he probably knew it. What changed him wasn't a decision, it was a consequence. Everything we do, or don't do, eventually catches up. The distance he kept from the world caught up with him in the shape of a 9-year-old girl who had grown up without him, who had learned to take up as little space as possible because no one had ever told her she was allowed to take more. That's what got through to him. Not guilt exactly, more like clarity, the kind that only arrives when you stop being able to look away. What I find myself thinking is that the people who matter most in our lives don't usually arrive with clear instructions. Ren didn't know if Callum would keep her. Callum didn't know if he was capable of being what she needed. Saoirse didn't know, writing that letter in the last months of her life, whether any of it would work out. They all acted anyway, with whatever honesty they had, with whatever steadiness they could hold on to, with whatever love they were capable of, in the shape they were in. That's not a small thing, that's most of what it takes. I think about the drawing Ren put on the refrigerator. The tall figure and the small one, not touching, but close. The space between them, deliberate. That's where most real relationships live. Not in the perfect moment, but in the closing of a gap. Not all at once, just a little more and then a little more, until the space between you stops being absence and starts being something you chose together. That's worth working toward, even when you don't know how. Especially then.